My original plan was to look at what Carl suggested, to introduce a definition for proposition, and try to finalize bad claim.
Okay. I don't know if you want, actually do read my paragraph. Sorry, I know it's longer,
Okay.
and or maybe ask me questions.
I'll have a read.
It's maybe relevant. Okay, that's working.
Now, the concept representation at a point in time is an immutable structure, but it would likely evolve over time. That makes it not immutable. But you're confusing immutability as a data structure with immutability from a conceptual point of view here.
No.
I don't disagree, by the way, what you write there, but it's just
yeah, you're right that I did not express this as well as I could. It's an immutable structure, but the concept evolves. The concept representation is immutable, but the concept evolves. So yeah,
by the way, we're pinpointing
that was
right now, entities, not data structures.
Correct.
So that's the whole point of the glossary, is not talking about data structures. But I mean, just from reading the introduction, but I can continue reading. I mean, you're already moving on to the next definition after bad claim, which we can also do. But I think I first want to try to find agreement on bad claim.
I think I'm fine with that.
Which you seem to be calling statement here.
Yeah, well, I've always said claim is a special case of, entity claim arguments. They're all, I'm using the word statement as a generic, and I'm still looking for a good generic name because I'm not sure statement is good, because statement reminds you of claims. And for me, entity names are part of what I'm trying to
But again,
call.
that might be something we can introduce after agreeing on bad claim, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, a lot what you write here, I think, is indeed the next step, similar to the Hangout discussion I had with Timothy on what he originally called a canonical claim, but it's.
Yeah, maybe just to be sure I am getting you right. Tim, I don't know if Tim's back. Oh, he's still around.
I'm back.
What?
I am back.
Okay, good. Yeah, when you said I changed my mind about what claim means, I'm not sure I'm clear on which ones, which is which.
Well, let me put it this way. Like, what I wanted was to separate the claim from the language used to express it.
Right.
And to me,
so
that was saying
you want the claim concept. Let's put it that way.
Right. I want it to be the concept, and the language is the way you represent it. It's the symbol, as you say.
Yeah.
And I still agree with that. But there's a complication of the fact that concepts change over time. And I do want a claim to be immutable, at least in the sense of.
Yeah, but that's why you have different terminology. So the bad claim can be immutable, but what you're saying is a concept claim, by definition, is not immutable. And that's fine. But that's why we're defining these things.
Right.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what I'm trying to outline in my long paragraph. It's if we have an immutable concept definition, but we still want the concept to evolve, I'm saying there's a kind of Janus-like
But that's a contradiction.
No, it's not.
It's a contradiction because in one sentence you're referring both to a data structure and to a concept, as in an entity.
What I'm saying is I have a concept which is evolving in time, but I have a data structure that represents a snapshot of that concept, and that one's immutable.
Exactly, but that's compounding things. There's no point in talking about data structures at this point in time. Like what you're saying is that a concept claim is mutable, period. We're not talking about mutable data
That's
structure.
correct. That's correct. That's correct. The concept claim is mutable. But what I'm saying is that on the other hand, we need to represent it.
Yes.
And this
but that's a later discussion.
Okay, fair enough.
If now we can just agree on a sentence like a concept claim is mutable, that would be a win.
I agree.
That I really want that to be accompanied by the example that changed my mind, and I can't quite remember what it was. I don't know if it was Paris, the city, which the concept of Paris, the city, changes over time, or
it's probably something more.
Example,
but I mean, we can get two examples once we add the concept claim definition to the glossary. I think for now, again, I just want to finalize bear claim because we didn't conclude that 2 weeks ago.
Okay, let's do that.
So let me share the screen. So I think we came to a lot of agreement on what matches the definition and what doesn't match. As a summary, I think one of the key things that we identified is that it needs to have some type of text in there. Although in our current definition, we don't state that it has to be a declarative sentence. A declarative sentence is one example of a shared immutable representation, but pretty much all of the things that match the definition, except the mathematical ones, have some type of text, like even the images, which seem to be broken, they contain just a pixelized representation of text. And to resolve that issue, I think Carl introduced maybe relying on proposition as a term. I started reading it up a bit on that.
I'd call it claim only.
Sorry?
Oh, okay, no. Proposition is part of that is constant.
So the interesting thing is that while I think we all intuitively agreed that as summarized by Carl here, that a bear claim may be a representation of a proposition. Like a proposition is the underlying thing, the underlying meaning, as written here, that can be represented as a declarative sentence. The tricky bit that we keep bumping into, if not a declarative sentence, what else can it be represented as? And the interesting thing is that even in linguistics, they also refer to a clause or sentence. And if you read up some other definitions, it really seems that each time you go back to this, declarative sentences are really key to, propositions. So
can you go back to I didn't have time to finish reading the proposition definition, apologies.
Sure. Go ahead.
Part of the meaning that is constant despite change of such thing as the voice or elocutionary force.
So I kind of bumped into a wall trying to use proposition to help better define bear claim.
I'm trying to, okay, if I said this meaning of proposition sounds like claim, not bear claim, but claim, does that feel right? And it's not, I'm not sure it's the concept.
It's irrelevant, it's terminology, right?
Yeah, but is there anything wrong with that?
Well, you're just suggesting a synonym.
Yes, but I'm saying, do you think it's not a synonym? And do you think it's distinct? And if so, how? And what I'm hearing is no.
Well, I don't know what do you mean by claim? That the whole thing we're trying not to have circular definitions.
Yeah.
Here, even in Wikipedia, in logic and linguistics, a proposition is the meaning of a declarative sentence.
Okay, so that's the, in a way, so that's the concept, closer to the concept claim.
Exactly. I'm more comfortable with calling it that because it doesn't use claim. So it is indeed closer to the underlying concept. But it's always, if you look at these definitions, it's always tied to a declarative sentence, which is very much aligned with, if we went over all of these examples, the problem we kept bumping into, that there needs to be a declarative sentence. Just a picture of a fur teacup does not contain a declarative sentence. So I'm more and more thinking, as Timothy has hinted at before, to just make the explicit representation of a declarative sentence a key part of the definition, which would still match all of these, as far as I know. It wouldn't resolve the outstanding ones.
It wouldn't match the image making a claim as a whole.
I think it does. Unfortunately, the image is gone. Oh no, it's here. Oh no, because it's a question. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, but
although flat earth debunked is a claim, declarative sentence. It's a non-grammatical declarative sentence.
It's
I mean, but that's not the I mean, what would you say the proposition here is?
Flat earth has been debunked
by the fact that I would say
you're right. My control.
I would say the proposition is that flat earth is debunked by the fact that nobody saw the sun at night.
Yes.
It's an argument in this case.
Mm-hmm.
It's a claim which happens to be an argument.
Yeah. If we're going to call it as a bad claim, I agree that would be the best, most likely interpretation of the declarative sentence, with some additional material to showcase what they mean.
Yeah.
But I think that the key thing for me is really that the conclusion is expressed as a declarative sentence. Or the, what would you call it? Yeah, if it's an argument that the conclusion, for example, is expressed as a declarative sentence.
I'm trying to understand what your proposal is. Are you saying we should define bare claim in terms of proposition? In which case I'm really uncomfortable, because it's about defining the language in terms of meaning, and which is obviously valid, we think before we speak. But on the other hand, I think what we're trying to do is, how can we define meaning from sentences? Like it's the reverse process we're trying to do. And I'd be more comfortable defining the proposition in terms of bare claim, which is in a way what they're doing in that linguistic definition.
Exactly, that's what I'm suggesting. Now we say, for example, declarative sentence. I think what I'm saying is that declarative sentence is a much more integral part of a bare claim than we try to make it out to be. So the reason Carl suggested proposition was to find this common thing between 1 + 1 = 5 and the other examples we have here.
Right.
But I mean, you could even say that 1 + 1 = 5. Really, the underlying declarative sentence is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm rereading the definition. Regardless of even if people when arguing, the only thing which can be assumed as shared context is shared immutable representation. So that is how did we handle? I'm trying to remember how we handled the hyperlink in that the only shared context.
The study at this example here.
Yes. Yes.
It's only the link that's shared context, like whatever changes within the hyperlink is not part of the bare claim.
Right. So it's very hard to argue for or against it because it's highly indexical.
Yes. So, and that's when we said we probably need some later, like what are acceptable bare claims. Yeah, exactly. But that's why it matches the definition. Okay.
It matches in a strange way. Yeah. I think I'd like a little note here saying that it's a bare claim, but not a good bare claim or something like that. It's a valid bare claim, but
something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, I'm happy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Though it is necessary sometimes to make references, right? To like indexical references are sometimes necessary. If I want to say War and Peace is a good book, I won't quote War and Peace as part of my sentence. I'm able to say War and Peace. It's indexical. I think it's a valid bare claim.
Yeah, I agree. In that case, I think what makes it valid is that it's a unique identifier of some sort.
Yeah.
So that's why DOEs and stuff like that in bad claims are probably useful.
Yeah.
Document object identifiers.
Yeah. The study of @study.com as retrieved at timestamp is.
Yeah, but that's what makes it less.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay,
but I don't think that's part of this discussion. Luckily, we can postpone that. That relates to what we talked about in Hangouts about what communities find acceptable and not. I think that warrants a separate discussion. For now, we only have 2 outstanding problems. That's the, like, what do we do with the scope? Like, what if it's whole books?
Yeah.
And can these 2 be considered bad claims or not? And then whether or not a declarative sentence needs to be within the shared representation. And I'm more and more leaning towards yes, by reading into propositions and linguistics. And I mean, it really, really is an essential part of it. Although I'm not fully comfortable because, yeah, of course, this one is not a declarative sentence, I would presume.
Yeah.
Even though this one is.
Yeah, clearly. One could say it's the 1 + 1 = 5 mathematics is a transcription of the 1 added to 1 = 5 linguistics. In a transcription in another language, like we accept that la terre est plate is a perfectly valid definition. I keep saying mathematics is a language. It's just a transcription in a different language. So that's why I would include it.
That could be a workable way of incorporating it.
Yeah, just say mathematic notation as a language. Now, the question of Communist Manifesto and Kill a Mockingbird are really interesting because there's the notion of composition. Is that the same as a huge compound claim? And now we're just looking at the implicit, and then, at the explicit, and then we look into implicit claims with Kill a Mockingbird. Those are interesting problems. Ha ha ha. So, do we accept compounds, right?
Yeah, we do. And in compounds, it means that, I mean, the reason we accept compounds is because you can point at the compound within the thing that matches it. And we know that that is the, those are the declarative sentences that match the bad claim, right?
Yeah. I think what's interesting, and we said we don't care if it's ambiguous. Like, we don't care if people agree what the compound is because we accept ambiguity. In that case, I see no reason to reject Communist Manifesto. Because that's the problem.
Did we agree on that, though?
That's the top. We said no matter if it's ambiguous. That's even if people do not truly understand each other.
Yeah, true. So does that also include whether or not the compound is ambiguous? That's a good point. I think that hints at the scope of these indeed. Like,
yep.
Where is a compound example here?
Yeah, there was a Trump is bad, Obama is great, considered as a whole. It's a compound.
So would it be okay to interpret this as Trump is bad alone and not as a compound? I actually think it wouldn't.
And this is where I'm getting uncomfortable. I don't have a strong opinion here. I'm grasping at straws a bit, in the sense that how much do we want to include implied claims? Like, there's the unclarity, ambiguity of a single claim. Yeah, sure, we want to include that. But when there's the sentence and all that it implies, well, all that it implies is bloody not obvious. I mean, anybody can infer anything.
The implied things are not included by definition. It's more like
that. Yeah, that's what I think. And in which case, if there's and this is where it gets interesting, if there's argument, which we agree is a claim, I think, with missing premises. Now, the missing premises are implied. Now, there's always missing premises, some of which are absolutely not controversial, right? I'm trying to find a good example. That is not definitional. Yeah, we often get into definitions, right? Something always coming up is, oh, some birds like penguins don't fly. And then, you know, I'm kind of, some people have made the argument that their swimming is a kind of flying in a different medium. But that's a definition battle. It's not the same as a hidden premise. What's a good hidden premise case? I'm sure it can be found.
I'm not certain that's the main problem here. I actually think what I wrote here still makes sense.
Sorry, I'm rereading.
That a bad claim needs to contain a shared immutable representation which can be pointed to with which you disagree in case you disagree with the bad claim as a whole. I think it's more about having one declarative sentence within the bad claim that kind of is the gist of the entire bad claim. In the case of Communist Manifesto, it would be something along the line of, well, actually there's multiple in there, so it's a compound, so yeah, it is problematic.
Yeah, but that's not the big problem, I think. The fact that it's a compound or an enthymeme, if you will, is not the big problem. The big problem is that there's tons of it's easy. Let's say, let me take 2 seconds to kill a mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
I could assume, let's assume To Kill a Mockingbird is actually a documentary, which we know it isn't, but doesn't matter for the sake of argument. And then I can agree that To Kill a Mockingbird is an accurate description of whatever happened. And I can disagree.
Yeah, but that claim, that declarative sentence, To Kill a Mockingbird is an accurate representation of what happened, is not within To Kill a Mockingbird. That's what for me doesn't make it a bad claim.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is To Kill a Mockingbird is, if you will, it's a description of these things happen, and each of those you can treat as this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Those are all claims. This happened, this happened, this happened.
No, but this happened is not written in To Kill a Mockingbird. That's a key difference with Communist Manifesto. Says this is what we should be doing.
Yeah, no.
But actual declarative sentence you can agree or disagree with is within the shared immutable representation.
That's clear.
In To Kill a Mockingbird, that's not the case. You need
to. No, I'm making the point there is, like, you know, I didn't read To Kill a Mockingbird, so I have to, and I don't remember the character names, but it's something like, you know, then Jack went to the room and spoke to Jill, right?
Yeah, true. Those are in there.
So those are all claims. Yeah. Right? They're all, this happened.
Yes. And so the distinction really lies in how clear is it which things you are agreeing and disagreeing with when you look at the shared immutable representation. I think that's the underlying thing here. But as a minimum requirement for me, it needs to be in the shared immutable representation. So meaning that in To Kill a Mockingbird, it would have to be a sentence like that, not with these events happen, because that's not written within the shared immutable representation.
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying. So a bear, when we, and maybe we should make that explicit.
Yeah, definitely. This is the underlying problem we have.
Yeah. Is that if we want to take a huge compound as a bear claim, then we have to pick a bear claim in the compound.
Yes, it's something along that I think we should work towards if we want to allow compounds as bear claims.
And then To Kill a Mockingbird, I could say, I agree that, yes, Jack spoke to Jill, but I don't agree with the overall theme that I do, by the way, but that's not the point, that I could disagree with the overall theme of the book, that psychiatric wards are inhumane, and which is stated nowhere in the book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that would improve this and resolve it. At the same time, I think we can also just shelve the whole discussion, because I think none of us want to have a system where you can add bad claims that are full books. Although we
I think you confused To Kill a Mockingbird with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but that's just an aside.
Or it was
I did, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Well, I read neither, so sorry. Shame on me.
I think none of us wants to add books as bear claims. I think Jonathan mentioned wanting to add books, but that was more in light of adding evidence. If I would look at that use case, it's more of like, here are relevant resources in light of this other bear claim.
No, I agree with that, but it's interesting in terms of as an edge case, right? We're trying to see what the edge case is.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perfect edge case, but we might also be delving too deep into this. But I fully agree indeed what you suggest, that in the case of bigger, large shared immutable representations, what really makes it a bad claim is the fact that there is a clear declarative sentence that summarizes in a way, one way or another, the bad claim. Something along those lines, I think, would be useful.
Yeah.
And then you can say, well, that's less the case for To Kill a Mockingbird and Communist Manifesto, which has an abstract. To Kill a Mockingbird doesn't have an abstract. So, I mean, right?
Yeah. Right. No, it's interesting. I'm liking where this is going at this point.
But how to write it up? Maybe we can do a working title. Maybe you can paraphrase. You can write Antoine.
Yeah, I can try. Sorry, I'm not at the not on the page. I should be actually. Something like
something with
in the case of complex bear claims.
Yeah, of complex shared, because we don't want circular definitions. A large, in the case of large shared immutable representations.
Yeah, the bear claim should include specific an explicit list of specific subclaims contained in that representation.
In the case of large shared immutable representation, an explicit list of declarative sentences.
Yeah.
Should be included.
Should be identified in.
Should be identifiable, because it's always going to be subjective.
No, I think it should be identified. It's like, this is my bear claim. Like if you have a different list, then provide a different bear claim based on the same shared immutable representation, but provide it. Burdens on you to list them.
Then we are implying that we always need to model declarative sentences in bear claims.
No, we're saying that if it's big and large, and there's many the list of, which could be of length 1, of bear claims in the text is not the bulk of the bear claim, then give the list so we know what the list is. And if you have a different list, well, that becomes a different bear claim based on the same shared immutable representation. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's what I'm proposing here.
No, I agree with it, except that it's not very operational, because it just postpones the problem of how much is too much. And does that mean that the image example we gave needs to have a list of? I don't think it gets us that much closer.
No, okay. In the case of the image, like for example, it would distinguish the case where, I said the claim is the whole argument, and you said, and you said at some point, even though you walked back, oh no, the claim is just the final sentence. Well, we could have those two as separate bear claims, and I'm saying the bear claim is this, and I
Yeah,
would-
but you're like at the same time saying that maybe the image by itself is not a bad claim. Only the image.
yeah, I'm saying that whenever there is, and we can make it operational by saying whenever there is disagreement about the list of bare claims, then identify one and identify both of them as separate, both lists as separate bare claims. If it's obvious what's the bare claim, sure. And I know Tim will be a bit annoyed that I'm using people's interpretations as part of the definition, but I do think it makes it operational.
I'm keeping silent just because I'm still trying to come to grips with the process, and it's an extremely circular problem. So I'm just slowly trying to piece through all this because well, I'll derail if I go into what my thoughts right now. But
let's see if we're
a basic question is, what are we going to do with these definitions? Why do we have them?
To improve our discussions, like just already now, actually, you can tell that it does help to be able to say whether or not you're talking about a bad claim or something different. But yeah, that's the main thing. So if we go back to
okay, let me give some examples, right? So because what we're doing is we're struggling, we're sweating fine details of very edge case examples, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my real question is that worth the effort?
No, that's what I said before.
As opposed to, right?
I think that's what I said. We can totally.
Let me finish my thought here. Let me finish my thought so that then we can. But yeah, as opposed to applying it and seeing if it, satisfies something we actually either want to do in the system or matches the use case, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of discussions around that in the end. But the other thing that I'm just reflecting on is how much this is exactly what we discussed again on, was it Wednesday or was it on Mighty? Now I don't remember, when we talked about definitional versus non-definitional claims, right? Or using definitional claims as a definition, right? That's actually what we're doing here, and piecing through how that works in practice, and if it helps us to think about that while we do this, which is, in the system as I saw it, you would have a claim and you fit a definition for each of these things, right? And the definition includes, I guess, maybe definitional claims that help sketch out the boundaries of this definition. And that's what we're doing here, is that our examples are actually definitional claims. Our examples are, this sentence or this thing here is their claim. Each of the examples, it's actually a definitional claim of this example is.
No, they're examples. The definition.
They're examples, but they're not they're examples, but they're all essentially definitional claims. If you just turn it into
definition claim would be
is a bare claim, right? You finish each of these things. 1 added to 1 equals 5. In other words, it'd be the sentence or the declarative sentence, 1 added to 1 equals 5 is a bare claim. That sentence there is a definitional claim.
Not for me.
For
me, the definitional claims, a bare claim is a shared immutable representation. For example, this is for me the definitional claim of a bare claim.
Yeah, I see what Tim is saying, by the way, and I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure either way.
Because at some point we'll hit a point where we will figure out the boundaries of a definition by coming up with examples that we're divided on whether or not that matches the bare claim. If we've stated there clearly the examples, they help kind of, yeah. I mean, because then you have non-definitional ones that are definitional ones that actually cause the breaking line to some degree. That's
yeah.
I'll let you react. One thing I'm saying is that at some point when you get an example that may or may not match an edge case, what we're trying to do is actually break up the definition that exists now. If this definition were to be immutable, we would break it up into a new definition which matches the example and maybe one that doesn't match.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree with that in principle. But in that sense, some of these edge cases are non-definitional. What I'm saying is we have a basic intuition, or I think we share a basic intuition of what the bare claim is. But and this basic intuition is still fuzzy, so we're still trying to find the edges of that definition. And
it is fairly specific.
In that sense, let me finish. In that sense, the edge cases, for me, they're empirical claims at this point, because I'm saying, well, we could decide to exclude them, include them, and it doesn't impinge on the core of the intuition. But at some point, we'll gel the intuition, and there the concept evolves. And then is it the same concept as the beginning? Well, no, because it's a continuity of it. But because now we are clearer about on which sides do the edge cases fall. And then the edge cases have become definitional for this new, more precise definition. But they were they were not definitional for the original fuzzier definition, right?
Right. Okay, what's going on here is that you're right. We're creating a definition, and it's a definition as any that is going to have ambiguities. And because you have an ambiguity, you will have like each of these below the other spot. You're right. They're not definitional. They are no.
They're tentative.
They're not, and they won't. They're not, and they won't. What they are debatable claims. The claim, the declarative sentence, the earth is flat, is a bare claim, is something that's debatable, right? And you have the definition bare claim is the sentences above it, right? And so we can debate. And the ones that matches definition are ones we have agreed in consensus that that statement is true, right? And the ones that are edge cases are highlighting where the definition is probably ambiguous. And what you're trying to do in this activity is reduce ambiguity. In other words, you're changing the definition. If we were to keep this in canonical debate or whatever, we would, say with that definition, these are the things that are true. These are the ones that people are disagreeing about. Then we create a new definition with extra, okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's all the stuff I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And it's all valid.
It's all valid. I'd say some of them are actually definitional, like this communism is good because it distributes wealth. Like if this one falls out of the definition, if we change the definition enough so that this one falls out, I'll say, okay, we're not speaking about the same thing anymore because this is part of my core intuition about what this concept is. And that means excluding it means that it's not a continuity. We've really moved on to a totally different concept. And that way it's not definitional as an individual. It's not that this is part of the definition and I'd like to give that specific example as part of the definition, but it's definitional in the sense, I know that this is not true anymore. We're not speaking about the same thing.
It's like Stephen says, it's highlighting a disagreement, and the disagreement is an indicator of ambiguity in the definition. But I wouldn't call it definitional. It's just a clear indicator of
interesting
and I'm realizing interpretation of the definition.
Yep. And that way, definitional is probably personal, right? Like I'm saying, if we don't include this, then we're not talking about the same thing. And you might have a different list of, deal breaker examples. So that's interesting.
But I don't think, and that's what I was trying to say before, I actually think our current definition is fine. We came a long way. I think these edge cases, it's fine to list them. But I don't think in our everyday discussions, going back to the use case that gave rise to the definition of bad claim, it's going to be a problem. because I don't think any of us is gonna agree or disagree that a whole book should be added as a bad claim. Like when we're discussing whether or not we want to support some bad claims and others not, I think we will have general agreements that we don't want to support adding To Kill a Mockingbird as a bad claim to the system, even though they might. So it might not matter. So maybe we should just shelve it.
It might matter in the sense once you apply, because there's a use case, and then there's, well, is the use case defining how the system is going to behave in this case?
No, it describes in language what it is, right? Right.
While it's describing it in language, that's okay. The moment we are having to design the interface and the constraints of what can be accepted as a claim, I do want that to be very clear. But at that point,
then we'll have
I may want to not include images, right? In which case, the bare claim isn't the definition I want, right? So
no, but the bad claim is the terminology you use to talk about that use case. So then you can say, I don't want to support image bad claims. But the point here is not to decide whether or not we should support images or not. It's giving language that we know what we're talking about. We're talking about bad claims, not about contextual claims, not about quotes, not about citations, not about definitions, unless definitions are bad claims, etc. It's again, it's to allow us to talk about it. It's not to decide what we have to implement. It's to allow discussions about what we want and don't want to implement. Did you see the difference?
I think I've lost you. Sorry, I lost. My mind wandered at a key moment. Apologies.
Essentially, let's try to go back where we were, even though we don't necessarily have consensus here. Although Timothy, I do think you agree mostly, actually. Carl, I don't know. Gene, well, we haven't seen him in ages. Bentley, I don't know. The point here is that this use case, where this whole discussion started, right now it doesn't just say claim, which is ambiguous because it doesn't have a definition. It now says bad claim, and here
yes,
that's the point of what we're doing.
Yeah. And I agree that this sentence is now much less ambiguous than it was.
That's the point. And then we can argue, is this the use case that everyone wants to support, or is there something else in bad claims you want to support? Or do you only want to support textual bad claims? Then we can start talking about that. But at least now we have a better understanding of what this sentence means.
True.
And now we can start discussing whether claim in this one, for example, is a bad claim or not. That's the point of this exercise.
Yeah. And I would argue not. It would be more a claim concept, and then we can have that conversation.
Exactly. And then if you say it's a claim concept, I might say, well, I think for me, I also want it as a bad claim, which means these are probably two separate use cases.
That's absolutely correct. Tim?
Yeah, I'm okay with this. I think we, having had this experience, I think we need to be a little less, spend a little less time on the definitions, be less precious about it. Focus more on, like come up with the text and come up with the examples.
Fair.
And then we can start using those words and then going through the use cases until we find a place where
there is disagreement. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
To an extent, we spend too much time on finding edge cases. While that's a good theoretical exercise, that has little practical benefit if there's no disagreement on. So with that said, Timothy, do you agree with the current definition of bad claim?
Well, that's the other problem, right? Is what does agreement mean in this case? Like, I accept using this as a definition. Yes. Do I agree that bare claim is an entity that is going to exist in the system that's a different question. I accept this definition and we can move ahead with it.
Yeah.
It is exactly this. So
Yay.
everyone should go over all items in alignment, check out the name, blah, blah, blah. Agreeing on whether another word used for definition is ideal or on whether it's useful should be deferred as much as possible. So I'll summarize it. It's written there. But what agreement means is that you agree that the matching definitions and the not matching definitions match the definition listed. We're not talking about whether or not this is something we want in the system, whether we're just talking about from now on, when we use bad claim, we have some common understanding that all of these are bad claims, all of these are not bad claims, and these are edge cases.
Right.
And if you agree with that, then we're good to move forward, I think, and start looking at the use cases again to see which one of these actually use bad claims, which ones do not, and then we can move on to a next definition of claim, which probably is concept claim, as Mike Antoine pointed out.
Which will be tough, but that's good. That's why there's work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, yeah, I accept the definition of bare claim. I don't accept the use case that based on the definition of bare claim. That's where we already get stuck.
But then,
right?
then we can start talking about the use case.
Yeah.
And then you can start explaining why you, for example, want to have a bad claim. What's different about what you want to do in this use case? We can try. I think the next 10 minutes we can just talk about this specific first use case, adopting the definition of bad claim, and then see whether or not that helps us.
Yeah, actually, I is at this point whether you would use this use case with a different definition of claim, and
exactly.
Then maybe it's concept claim already, and it's time to introduce concept claim. It's possible.
Exactly. But so I can summarize, because I introduced this one. For me, why I want this to be a bad claim is exactly the mutability attribute of it. Because when I link as a, I think Carl made the same comments before. When I add something to a system.
Hello.
Did you say something?
Here.
Hello. Sorry, getting a phone call.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
When it was spurious.
When I write a whole argument and I formalize that and I upload that to a system, I want it to be immutable. I want that to remain there. That's why the immutable part of bad claim is so important to this use case for me. I want it to be shared in the sense that I want other people to be able to link to the same thing. So the whole point of uploading it to a central database for me is so you can centralize the arguments around that bad claim with other posts. I don't want this bad claim to evolve over time, like potential canonical claims might be a concept claims, because I might not agree with these changes and I don't have time to keep track of all my contributions and to verify whether or not I agree with them. I am linking to the bad claim. So that's for me this use case. But then maybe Timothy, you can go over whether or not you understand it differently or whether you want to support it differently, etc.
So first, Tim, am I understanding right that you would like to use concept claims here, or are you thinking of yet a third definition of claim?
I'm thinking of a narrowing of the definition of bare claim, which is like I don't know how I would want the definition to go, but maybe it's just that I would want to nail it down into declarative statement.
I would even agree. And I think that arose while we're defining bad claim as like we all feel this cutoff point where bad claims become useful, and some people find that they need to be declarative sentences. On structure trees, for example, I went as far as not to allow compounds. And I think we indeed need to decide on like some cutoff point that we can define. And that's why I added this placeholder for valid bad claims. But then what is valid, right?
you know, the definition name is just a name. It's a word we're going to use over and over again. We don't have to define valid. We have to define valid bear claim, right? So we could even call it a simple bear claim or a Tim bear claim or whatever.
Yeah, well, the name will depend on the name will depend on what you want it to be.
Right.
Speaking of which, I think, by the way, that better name for bear claim is probably still explicit claim. I start liking it more and more, but maybe it's too late to change it.
Well, except that bear claim as it's defined there, I say its problem is it's not explicit. So then I would maybe define an explicit bear claim or an explicit claim or something like that. Because what I'm looking for here to get rid of from bear claim are the things that are not clear and not explicit, the things that lead to ambiguity and understanding based on format, right? So, you know, so if I'm trying to reduce ambiguity, I know you can't eliminate ambiguity. I'd like the ambiguity to be focused on the definitions of the words used rather than the form, which means I would actually be okay with 1 + 1 = 5 because I don't see ambiguity there, even though it's not a declarative sentence. However, memes, images,
images without text right now are outside of scope, just for reference.
Right.
No, but I think I understand what you're saying. Like the whole Paris is nice controversy, right? You don't want Paris is nice. You want Paris, Texas is
no, I'd be okay with Paris. Like I said, I'm okay with ambiguity in terms of the understanding of the words used.
Oh, okay.
But not in the form of the way it is expressed. In other words.
Okay. So if you have to work to extract the
exactly
the bear claim from the sentence, like for the image, forget it's an image. If it were just the text of the image, that's a kind of bear claim, but it's not clear what the claim is. That's what you want to eliminate.
Yeah. The other thing is, and that's one of the things I'd like to eliminate. There are other reasons I'm not in favor of an image that has text. Because
but I'm saying let's just look at the text of that. Let's
well,
look at the text of that image.
I've never, I mean, this is me talking against my previous design decisions because I never wanted images on soccer trees, but like the example I gave, where was it? That this happened with the Holocaust picture. I actually think that would be useful because expressing expressing stuff like that in text is impossible.
So there is something to this in that my view of a Tim claim or canonical claim or whatever is that it is composed of elements, right? And so far have been words, but when you, for example, a URL to me is something that is an entity, right? I'm trying to think of the right way to explain this, but in the general case of evidence where you say, this study proves, or this image represents, or this, when you're talking about something that can be represented by URL, that URL to me is a valid entity to have in a claim. It's essentially something that's defined by the destination of the URL itself.
Yeah, but within the definition of bad claim, because now you need to make sure, I mean, we listed the URL examples on purpose. It's not part of the shared immutable, the contents of the URL are not part of the shared immutable representation, hence are not part of the bad claim. Only the URL is.
I think that's exactly what Tim is disagreeing with, and that's a valid position. It's just a different position.
But disagreeing with what?
The notion that the target of the URL, the target of the URL's content, the content of the URL's target, sorry, is.
You want to include it, you mean, in your
No. Like, no? I think the target itself, yeah. I think the target itself is the way I see it as being the claim. I want to, or I imagine resolving the problem of that thing changing through other solutions. In other words, like Internet Archive type things.
Yeah, but if
we're not speaking about the fact that it changes. The question is it legal to say, for example, let's look at it, this study proves X. Do we consider the study, assuming it doesn't change, assuming it's a IPFS URL, it's still a URL, it's a reference to something external, that one doesn't have the problem of changing. Do we accept that you need to look at the study to know whether it's true or false?
Exactly.
In the definition of bare claim, the answer is no. In your definition, as I heard it, the answer is yes. It's, again, perfectly valid alternate position.
Well, the shared representation is made explicit, right? So
is that your position? That's first question. Let's solve that.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I'm digesting this a little bit.
For me, if you want to require the people that are reading the claim to read the full study should be part of the bare claim. It is part of the shared immutable representation.
But I mean, to me, it's like saying President Biden is doing a good job. Does that mean President Biden has to physically be included in the immutable representation to debate about it? I don't. No, I see a parallel there.
Shared immutable representation is a text, President Biden. That's the point.
No, but Tim's asking a very valid question. I mean, we accept unambiguous references to external knowledge in the form of names of concepts, people, entities, whatever.
That's a Paris is nice example all over again.
Totally. And but even Paris, the city in France, defined, I could be as precise as I will. I'm still referring to a ton of knowledge about Paris, which I assume we share.
Yes, which is not part of the shared immutable representation. So it's
that's correct.
That's correct. Bare claim. There's
not the bare claim. I agree
on
totally.
Everything that's not shared immutable representation.
No, it's not the bare claim, but it's still assumed shared knowledge to determine whether it's true or false. And that means we cannot, the question is.
That's why I call it explicit. That the point is you draw an explicit boundary, but you draw an explicit boundary between what is required to be shared and what isn't. Like how that is stored, I don't care, but I care that it's immutable and that it's explicit.
Yeah.
So if it's a DOE and it's explicit that you need to read the entire paper in order to agree or disagree with the bare claim, that's fine.
Okay. Just as you need to know about Biden, just as you need to know about Paris. It's fair.
But I think what Timothy was getting at with and I agree with him there, that we all agree that we, of course, want a subset of bare claims. And I think for him, he finds it very important that there is a very explicit reified declarative sentence in there. And I agree.
Yeah, that's I think, okay, so we agree we want another definition.
Yeah.
I see the point. So that's our next meeting.
I think so. And it is this thing that we added there ages ago is a valid bare claim.
Okay.
And that there's some properties, but we need to add examples because right now, as you heard, Timothy is having a really hard time defining it. And we need to define it to see whether or not we agree.
Okay.
And if we don't disagree, it means that we're talking about different use cases. And that's the whole point.
Okay.
So see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.